Welcome back. Now, members of the former SABC Interim Board of 2017 are today expected to hold a media briefing to respond to an SIU report into the procurement of the 185 million rand security tender at the public broadcaster. Now, the report has found damning evidence of irregularities in the procurement and the awarding of the contract by the Interim Board to Mafoko Security. And to speak to us more about this, we joined right now from our studios in Parliament by the head of the SIU, Advocate Andy Mothibi. Advocate, thanks so much for your time and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much, Sakina, for inviting us to come and engage on this matter. As I indicated to you earlier on, it's a bit faint. The voice is not clear on this technology this side, but I'll do the best with what I can hear from you.
And I'll also try from my side to be as audible as I possibly can. Advocate, if we could perhaps just start by just taking a brief look at the investigation that you actually went into regarding this particular tender. How did it come about? Right,
how did it come about? You would know that we were at that stage busy investigating irregularities that were covered by a proclamation that was issued and publicized by the President in 2017. As we were engaged in the investigation at SABC, we were at some point approached by the chairperson of the board, and I would say he did that on behalf of the board as the accounting authority, with the request to investigate the security contract. So we gathered evidence regarding that security contract, and as it was not covered by the scope of the 27 proclamation, we had to approach the President because our law requires that any investigating scope has to be covered by the proclamation. So we approached the President with the request to extend and amend the 2017 proclamation. It was amended accordingly and covered the scope to investigate the security contract. We undertook that investigation in line with our investigation methodology. We conducted interviews, we went through the documentation, we assessed it against the procurement processes, procurement policies and guidelines, and the requirements of the National Treasury Regulations and the Public Finance Management Act, and also the SABC guidelines and whatever regulations and policies there would be. So we came to, once we've done that, and I should also say that there were also allegations presented by the members of the board that there might have been allegations of corruption relating to the process of procurement. We also looked into those allegations of corruption. So if you look into our report, we did that, and as we speak to date, there hasn't been any tangible evidence that we have found that points to the contravention of the Prevention of Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. We have, however, made a finding based on the evidence that we collected and assessed that there is irregularity in the manner in which the contract was awarded. The constitution of the procurement committee, the bid evaluation committee, there is also evidence that we have gathered that indicates that the board at the time may have overlooked some of the advice that was given to them, and in that regard, had they considered the advice, they would probably have looked at this matter differently and probably not signed off and awarded this contract. As you would know, that we are at this stage, there's a litigation pending in the High Court. We have joined in that litigation. We are going to present our case so that we can satisfy the court that our findings are to the effect that there is irregularity. So,
Advocate Mothibi?
where we sit, hello?
If I may just interject there, when you say the board may have found itself, in a position where it did not heed advice that may have resulted in a different action, what sort of advice was that and where did it come from?
The evidence that we have gathered and collected is that from the procurement department of the corporation, there is evidence that indicates that they would have also interacted with the National Treasury and obtained, call it a advice or some directive relating to this process, and that interaction with the National Treasury indicated that it would not be prudent to proceed with this process. That is an additional factor that we took into account. But otherwise, our investigation looked at the process itself from the time of the submission of the tender, the constitution of the procurement committees, and the process that led to the ultimate sign-off by the interim board. So at this stage, that's the part that we are able to indicate publicly. And once we have, by the way, we are at a stage where, when we have submitted our report as required by the law, when we complete our investigation, we submit the report to the President. Now in this case,
please conclude
if I can
that
just
point.
Conclude.
Yes, please.
Hello?
Please conclude the point, Advocate Mothibi.
I wanted to conclude and say, in this case, we submitted the report to the President, but because there's a pending litigation, there was also a requirement by the court process that our report, the corporation needed to file it in court. So when we submitted the presidential report, we made that indication to the presidency that the corporation requires this report to file it in terms of the court process. So it's all, because it's the presidential report, only the presidency can release that, and the presidency released it to the SABC. And I'm informed that the SABC then dealt with, according to the internal process, submission to the board and made it available to the former interim board members. And then as we sit now, I assume that it would have been filed in court.
So the report has been widely disputed by the implicated persons. Its veracity has been questioned. Some people have said that looking at it, the fact that it is so thin, for example, also puts to question whether this is in fact a final report or is it a preliminary report.
No, I can't really hear properly. As I indicated earlier on, I'm trying to make the best of what I have here, but I can't hear you properly.
And I do apologize for that, Advocate Mothibi, but let me just try one more time. If you can hear me now, the report has been widely disputed by the implicated persons. They have questioned its veracity. You have unpacked for us the methodology used, but do you stand by those findings?
As the best I could hear from you was that the interim board members are questioning the veracity of the report. It's obviously, in their rights to question the report as they do, but we are saying we are at the stage where there's litigation. We do stand by our findings in that report, and we will present the details of our finding at court to indicate that we are justified in our finding. And I should just indicate that when we when we did this investigation, amongst others, we looked at what are the delegation of authorities and what is the role of the board and what processes should have been followed. And in this case, we're saying from what in risk management terms is called either a possible failure of people, process or systems. In this case, we looked at whether there could have been a failure of people responsibilities at all levels, whether it's at the level of procurement management or the board, whether there has been a failure of systems or processes. And in processes, we mean if there's been a failure of process on following up with the process, we made a finding.
Well, Advocate Mothibi, thanks so much for your time. We'll leave it there. Apologies for the poor sound connection there between us. And that, of course, just getting clarity from the SIU regarding that latest report around the security tender that was issued by the SABC. Advocate Andy Mothibi, the head of the SIU, talking to us about those investigations and how exactly they went about the process. All right, let's go now to